Welcome to Breaking Ice Productions. My name's Josh Ferguson. I'm your host, and today I have the lovely opportunity of sitting down with Mayor Frank Pope.
Yeah, Frank Pope, born in 1942 in Dundee, Scotland. Raised in Scotland until I was 17 years old. Immigrated to Canada to work for the Hudson's Bay Company.
That's quite a story. So what prompted you to leave Scotland, in the beginning? And why Canada?
Well, growing up, like I said, born in 42, right in the middle of WW2, I reached the age during that war period where I remember the bombers coming over. I remember getting sirens, air raid alarms to go to our shelter out behind our house to shelter until the sirens quit. So I started off that way. I started school at 4 years old, and I quit school the day I turned 15 to go to work. That's how it was back then. My dad was a riveter, building ships during the war, therefore was ineligible to go to war. He was unable to join up, he had to stay and build ships. But he joined the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve and therefore did exercises in the summertime on minesweepers in the North Sea, sweeping for mines. So that's where I got my sort of background and how to work hard for a living, and there's no free lunch. So because of his naval background, I was very active in the Sea Cadets. And one of the highlights of the Sea Cadets was we used to go to our annual camp to a sort of fleet air arm base. That's where they trained all the jet fighters that landed on aircraft carriers. And one of the summers I was there, I spent in a day with another cadet working on gliders, running the equipment that towed the gliders to a speed where they could take off, drop the cable, and go flying. And our job was to keep the cable stretched out, hook it up, and work on it. At the end of that one day, the guy in charge came and said, "Okay, boys, flip a coin. One of you is going for a glider ride and one of you is not." I lost. But I was fine. It worked out in the long run because the next morning I was roused at 6 o'clock to get out of bed, get dressed and go to the mess and eat breakfast and meet them at one of the hangars. So I showed up at one of these hangars and they're saying, "Okay, we're going to try you on for a parachute."
And wait, how old are you at this point?
14.
You're 14, okay.
So they said, "We're going to try you on this parachute. It's going to be too big for you. So remember, if you ever have to use it and jump, your nuts are going to end up in your mouth." So that was a good start to my morning. So they took me out to the airfield, and there was a Meteor Mark 7 jet fighter, a trainer. What had been a fighter was now a trainer. He said, "You're going up here for a ride." Gliders be damned, this was a winner. So I got up front. It was a two-seater. You sit in the front, the pilot's in the back, and away we went. So we're up over the Murray Firth, the North Sea, up in that area, north of Scotland, flying. And I looked out the window, and there was a bunch of jet fighters shooting at us, or I assumed they were shooting at us. We were towing a target banner for them to practice on shooting. It was about 100 meters behind the jet we were in, and they used that for target practice.
So they were shooting live ammunition?
I believe it was, because there was an awful lot of holes in that target when we landed. But that was the thing. So it was a great flight. That was a great introduction to it. That was my first ever flight, by the way. So coming out of the cadets, 15, 16, I played a lot of football. The one where they kick the ball and don't throw it. So I spent a lot of time doing that, both at a primary school and at the senior school. I also was a boxer. My dad was a British champion amateur boxer, so I took up the thing. The only difference between him and me, he had a tough nose and I didn't. My nose kept breaking. But I was still able to fight, but a lot of the times there was so much blood they didn't want me to fight, and so I quit. My nose was all over my face, so I just gave up. But I won quite a few good fights in the way through. So I quit school at 15, went to work to try to learn the trade of polishing furniture, called the French polisher. So you're working with all kinds of veneers and woods.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden, when I was 16, I saw an advertisement in our local newspaper. Gentlemen adventurers wanted to come to Canada, work for the Hudson's Bay Company. I said, well, what the hell? Anything's better than polishing furniture. So I put my application in, was interviewed in Scotland, was accepted for the job, but being 16, have to have the signature of both parents. My dad was fine. He said, no, this will be a great adventure for you. It was a 3-year contract. He said, we'll be back in 3 years and all this great stuff. My mother was leery of it. But eventually I turned 17. She signed the papers. In July the 23rd, 1959, I was on a ship to Canada.
So, man, that is wild. I feel like it's so... Were you scared? Where were you at when you were going? Like, it's such a big change. Had any of your family kind of moved away from home in a big way like that? Like, when you were living in Scotland, was there extended family all around you?
I had a lot of family who were in what there used to be the jute trade, who used to travel to India quite a bit and come back with stories about that. But that was not where it came from. I had one older brother, 12 years older than me, and he was in Britain working, and he had a good job, good family.
But Britain is close, all things considered.
Yeah, but it was an adventure. I was, as soon as I saw the advertisement, I was gung ho. I was going.
Yeah,
and Canada was the first opportunity, so I took it.
Yeah.
So I came over on the ship, landed in Montreal.
Can you give me a little bit more detail about what the ship was like? Like who were the characters on the ship? Was it?
It was a it was a Cunard liner, the Corinthia Cunard liner, sailed from Greenock, Scotland to Quebec City, is where we actually disembarked. And then we got back on the ship after a few hours in Quebec City and went to Montreal, where we got our landed immigrant status.
Okay.
Went to the Hudson Bay Company, picked us up, put us up in a hotel in Montreal, got us dental work, they got us medicals, they got everything to make sure we're ready to go up north. There was, I think, 14 or 17 of us. Some got on the train west to the western part of Canada, and there were some of us stayed in the east. So,
give me your first impressions of arriving to Canada for the first time. And I got one more question after that. But, like, what was that like? Like, was it so different from what you had experienced previously?
I think the very first thing that got me, we were in the hotel in Montreal, went down to the coffee shop and went and wandered around right just out in the street. And all we saw were Cadillacs, or what seemed to be Cadillacs. Big, beautiful, coloured vehicles. Taxis were Cadillacs, and the other first thing that caught our mind was right across the road from our hotel was Dow's Red Cap Brewery. So here we are, a bunch of young bucks out of Scotland saying, God, a brewery, we should check it out. We're all 17, 18, you know. Went across, and I think the drinking age in Montreal was 21. But we managed to scam a dozen beer each back to the hotel room. And that was our first taste of Canada.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what the thing is. For people who may be aged, the first thing we did is watch a ball game with some of the most famous people nowadays who played. Hank Aaron was playing, Warren Spahn, the Stan Musial, famous ball players. That was our first look of a ball game. Black and white TV, and that was it. God, I love this game, you know.
Totally.
And we didn't know who these people were, but finds that they were actually quite famous eventually. So then I got on a train out of Montreal, all the way up to a place called Cochrane in Northern Ontario.
Yeah.
Got on another train there and went to, I think it was a couple 100-mile trip that took about 8 hours.
Yeah, on the Polar Express?
Polar Express to
yeah.
Moosonee. Got picked up in Moosonee, went by canoe across to Moose Factory, which was an island. And I spent the first 2 years of my Canadian Hudson Bay life in Moose Factory, Ontario.
Wow, what a journey. So are you in touch with any of those boys that you were, in that hotel room with, or that went east with you? An
amazing story. I ran into a newspaper article a few years ago about a fella who I'd read who had found out he had a love child in northern Quebec.
Okay.
One of the places we went to after the Moose Factory was Grateful River, Quebec.
Okay.
Post de Baleines in French, I believe it was. But anyway, I read this story, and this was this guy. He found out he had a daughter in the Arctic, and he went up and found her and brought her back to Montreal or back to, I think, Ontario for a visit and formed that relationship. So he's about 2 years older than me. He's coming here to spend a month with me this summer up here.
And you guys had connected way back then?
We connected in 1959, and he's coming up to pay me a visit because he wants to just sit and talk about the past.
He's coming up this summer.
Coming up this summer.
Well, we're going to have to talk all together. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an avid fisherman, and he's got his grandson that plays in the East Coast Hockey League, who's in the playoffs right now. We keep in touch.
Oh, no way.
So, but that was it. So from Moose Factory,
Yeah.
I went up to a place called Great Whale River, as I said, on the east coast of the Hudson Bay.
Great Whale?
Great Whale River.
Yeah.
And there was a Mid-Canada Line Armed Forces base there.
Okay.
So we had all we had a mess where we could go and visit for beer at 2 bits a bottle and stuff. So
How far was the Great Whale River, like from Moosonee?
about a 3-hour DC3 ride. Went up by DC3, about 3 hours maybe.
It's a plane.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, okay, so I've been to Moosonee and Moose Factory like 3 times, eh?
Yeah.
Myself, and I traveled down the Harricana River by canoe, and then we crossed the bottom of James Bay.
Yeah.
Paddled it, and I've done this trip multiple times, and then we spend about 3 days in Moosonee and Moose Factory. So I've been there, and I have a sense of what the place is like, but I don't know it that well, clearly, as well as you know it. But I'm very familiar with that landscape and that region.
Well, that was my introduction to Canada. Was living in that area. Unbelievably good, great people. The crew were so easy to work with, to get along with. Just enjoyed it.
And yeah, give me like what was your day to day working for the Hudson's Bay Factory? Like, give me just a little snippet of that.
The whole idea was that we're going to train you to be a post manager, working for the northern stores.
Okay.
So you were learning everything from merchandising to bookkeeping, all that type of stuff. But I'll tell you, the very first job I got when I got off in the Moose Factory, my first day on the job, was I was stuck in the basement bagging potatoes into 10-pound bags out of 100-pound bags, weighing them for 10 pounds, bagging them up and putting them on display in the store.
How long did you do that
So
for?
that was an introduction to merchandising. But that's how they teach you.
Yeah.
I mean, I was working for $175 a month, from which I paid back my boat trip over.
Yeah.
I paid room and board, and coming from Canada, from Britain, I had no winter clothing, so I had to buy all that stuff. So it was a great introduction to Canada. But going on to the highlight of my sort of days with the Hudson Bay Company was at Great Whale River. I was assigned by the manager of the store there to go with the Hudson Bay ship, the MV Fort Severn, to the Belcher Islands to shut down a camp post. We had a store on the Belcher Islands run by an Inuit fellow, Sam Crow, and his main purpose was to sell merchandise, groceries particularly, buy white fox and buy carvings, Inuit carvings.
Okay.
So my job was to go over there, take him and the people that lived there, load them all on the ship, empty the store, take every man, woman, child, and everything they owned on the ship, including dogs.
Okay.
Maybe 100 dogs. We sailed north till the people said, that's where we want to go. We went into that area, which is now called Tanikiloak,
Okay.
and we built the Hudson Bay store there for the people. I had 2 carpenters with me on that trip. I ran the store with Sam Crow from under a tarp on the beach.
And how old were you at this point?
I might have been 19.
Okay.
Still not old enough to go into the bar at the mess, but still old
but
enough
you
to
can go
enjoy
establish
life.
Hudson's Bay store, yeah.
So that was one of the highlights. We got that thing done. We got the store built, and I flew out of there, I think, just before the lake, the area froze up, and I was back to Great Whale River.
How long did the construction take? And you guys had all the materials from the previous store? Is that
No, we brought that ship in with a new store on board.
okay?
And when they said, stop, build the store, what had happened, that area where they were living was completely trapped out. There was very few seals left. The beluga whales were no longer there, and the whole terrain there was no more foxes. So they wanted to move, and the Hudson Bay said, "Yeah, we'll move you. We'll build you a new store. We want the foxes, and we want your carvings."
Okay.
So that was sort of the highlight of that part of the story.
And I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around building it. Do you guys have like plans for the store, or did you just have a sense of what it should look like?
Oh, no, we had a set of plans.
Okay.
I was not the carpenter.
Yeah.
I was just the camp cook. We had two carpenters that were actually from the armed forces who took a leave of absence from the armed forces from Winnipeg to come up and actually build the store on contract.
Wow.
And we had it was a great, we lived in the community, we lived on the beach. Every morning you get out your tent, there was a fresh Arctic char sitting on the front of the camp ready for you to cook up for breakfast. Fantastic. Just
Wow.
great people and great place.
So at this point, how are you thinking about Scotland? Are you kind of like, oh yeah, I'll go back sometime soon, or are you like just totally bought in?
Well, when you hear of the, say here with the oil companies,
Sure.
you come in for 2 weeks, you go home for 2 weeks. I went in for 3 years, went home for 2 weeks. I did 3 years without a holiday.
And then did you come back immediately and do 3 more years?
Well, here's the story. I got to Montreal on my first holiday. I was actually going to sail back to Scotland on vacation. But I got pissed and missed the boat. I missed my ride home. I had stayed in Montreal a week too long. So I went and signed up with the Hudson Bay Company for 2 more years so they could pay my holiday for me. So I went to them. They signed me back up for 2 more years, and they looked after me. I went on my holiday. And
So were your parents expecting you to walk off the boat and you just...
yeah, and they didn't have a phone. I had nobody to call. I had to get a hold of somebody. They finally knew that I wasn't coming. Yeah, they were not very happy, but I didn't tell them why I didn't make it.
Sure,
Just
sure.
It was winter. The plane was late or some damn thing. But
2 more years?
yeah.
Where'd you go next?
Well, I came back over. We sailed back over. I went back. This time we were on the Empress, the Canadian Pacific ships.
Okay.
So came back on the Empress, I believe, of Empress of Canada. And just as we were heading into Canada, off the coast of Newfoundland, we hit a hurricane.
Oh my God.
We actually ran into a hurricane on that ship off the coast of Newfoundland. And they closed the bar up. They closed everything up. But they closed it up and left it open for us. There was a bunch of 8 or 10 of us that stayed up. Didn't go to bed, didn't go and hide, just partied all night. We actually persevered, and the 8 of us that stayed up all night were the only people that went for breakfast that morning out of 240 passengers.
So you guys partied through the hurricane?
Partied right through the hurricane.
I feel like that's a name of an album of some kind, or something like that.
It was good. There were 8, like some were university students from the States, a couple of were Canadians, one other was a Hudson Bay guy, a friend of mine. So we partied all the way across pretty well.
Wow.
But then I got back to Canada, and they put me on a Viscount aircraft, flew me to Edmonton.
Okay.
And all the way up the Mackenzie Valley to a place called Reindeer Station.
Okay, where's that? You need
That
to
is about 30 miles north of Inuvik.
Okay.
And that's where the reindeer herders lived, who herded the Canadian Reindeer Project. That was a reindeer herd that came in from Alaska they walked them in from Alaska to Reindeer Station as a sort of a harvesting thing and a marketing thing for the Inuit people of the Mackenzie Delta.
Wow. So, what are you, in your early 20s at this point?
20. I would have been 20.
Yeah, okay.
Because I went to get a liquor store permit and I had to be 21. I still couldn't get a permit to buy booze, but I was still surviving. So yes, I lived there with the reindeer herders for quite a few years. One of my best friends, who was my next door neighbour in Reindeer Station, they call it Freddie Carmichael,
Okay.
who was a very famous gentleman, one of the first Inuit pilots.
Okay.
Had his own airline eventually, Reindeer Air Services up in Inuvik. So he was a good friend. I ended up with a dog team.
Okay.
I used to go from Reindeer Station to Inuvik with my bunch of dogs.
That's 30 kilometers, more or less.
Yeah, 30 miles. No,
30 miles,
Yeah,
okay.
we hadn't talked miles back in these days, guys.
50 kilometers.
And back in these days at Reindeer Station, at the end of November, we get around 40 to 50 below. Fahrenheit.
I bet.
And about the middle of February, we'd get warm right up to about 35 below Fahrenheit. That's how long winter took. I used to have a blowtorch on my fuel coming out of my tank every so often because it turned to grease, just to keep the thing flowing. And it was pretty tough because the store and my house were all in the same building.
And were you working for the Hudson's Bay
I
Company?
was still with the Hudson Bay Company.
Okay.
This was still with the Hudson's Bay Company, yeah. I ran the post there.
Yeah.
And just one of the stories that comes, like I said, I had my own dog team, and I used to pretty well run to Nuvik on a Friday night, go to the bar, and come back on Saturday night, open the store again for Monday morning. And
So
sometimes
what was the population in Reindeer?
maybe 100 dogs and maybe about 40 people.
Okay, small.
But they did have a small school there, and
Okay.
the power plant was run there as well.
Okay.
Great little community. And I used to buy fur there to get a lot of unbelievable Mackenzie River mink was in that area. Martin, fantastic fur area, really good fur, good purchases.
So, wow. Okay, so at this point, you've been working in Canada for some time. You still can't drink,
No, I was still teetotal.
and you've spent most of your time in Canada in the north. And was it clear to you that you just wanted to continue up north, or did you have any desire to go live in any of the, bigger cities down south? Like, that's a big difference in experience.
Not once.
Not once.
Not once. This is the life I wouldn't say I quite anticipated.
Sure.
It was way more than I anticipated. Way far. It was just a great life, but you had to work hard. Mm-hmm. You had to be able to adapt to the climate. You learn very quickly. I learned a lot of my northern skills from the Cree of the James Bay, and then the Inuvialuit people of the Mackenzie Delta. If you, as a non-Aboriginal person, come to any of these territories, listen to what you're told.
Yeah.
Learn from them.
Yeah.
But never tell them that you're better than them, because they, without telling you, know they're better than you're ever going to be. But they, on occasion, have saved my life, in fact.
Yeah.
They are great people. All the Aboriginal people I've ever worked with have been very, very good people.
That's
You'll learn from them.
yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
obviously.
But then up in the ranger station, I used to really enjoy it up in that area. And one of the, what at that time was not a highlight, but it became one of my stories down the road, was one of the areas where I lived was the east branch of the Mackenzie River. So anybody that paddled the Mackenzie River on their way to Tuck usually stopped to visit.
Okay.
So I got up one morning, it might have been early September, miserable, muddy time of year, and right down and below the store where my dogs were tied up were tents. So I went and visited the guys. They were all in the mud, they were freezing to death, soaked to the nuts. So I invited them all up to come and visit into the store. I let them hang their tents in the store to dry out. I felt so sorry for them. There were a group of French-Canadian university students canoeing from Providence to Tuck.
Okay.
And they were determined they were going to go to Tuck no matter what the weather was. So I got to know them. One or two of them were pretty good English. And eventually I learned out that one of the guys who I'd looked after, his name was Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
Okay. All right.
He's one of the guys who I'd looked after that day as a student who was stuck in the mud.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wow, what an encounter.
Yeah. I eventually met him at the Arctic Winter Games in Yellowknife, and we had it. He remembered that story.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so then now that you had kind of established yourself up here and were living a life up here, how long did you stay in Reindeer Station? And then when did you just kind of move down the river?
No, I went from Reindeer Station. They sent me down to Northern Ontario to a store north of Thunder Bay.
Okay, way in the south.
Yeah,
Yeah.
way down south. And it's about that time that I was negotiating a new contract. As I said, I started at $175 a month, and dealing with the Hudson Bay Company, I was already all the way up to $300 a month after 5 years.
Okay.
And I negotiated, I wanted a raise of $25 a month.
Okay.
They offered me 10.
Uh-huh.
I no longer worked for the Hudson Bay Company after that.
Okay.
That's how cheap they were. They wouldn't give me a $25 raise. They would give me
a month. Yeah.
bastards. So that was it. I quit, jumped on the train.
And how would you describe your skill set at this point?
I could run this. I was already a post manager running stores.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot. They did that 5-year training program was invaluable to me.
Okay.
First of all, it taught you to work for a living. There's no shortcuts. Look after yourself. It taught me to look after my house. It taught me how to cook for myself and for my staff. So it was a great learning experience. I'd wish it on anybody to try it.
And had you conceptualized yourself as like a leader at that point?
I think at that time I may have been able to say I was learning to become a leader.
Sure.
I was not there yet.
Uh-huh.
I was still learning from my peers.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, as I said, I quit the Hudson Bay Company. I jumped on a train in Armstrong, Ontario.
Okay.
And went all the way to Edmonton. Don't ask me why I went to Edmonton. That's where I went to.
That's where you went.
But I did have a couple of friends there that I was able to stay with and get sort of settled down. I applied on some jobs and was accepted to go to a job in northern Alberta, Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, as a clerk working for the Indian Affairs branch.
Okay.
So that was my next northern post, was up in Fort Chip, another great place, wonderful people up there. The Cree, the Métis, and the Chip people all sort of worked very closely together. So that was a good life as well. I enjoyed it there. I did an awful lot of fishing. We ran some fishery projects on which they used to catch goldeye, and then the planes that come in from Winnipeg and pick up the goldeye, and I think they paid 15 cents a pound for the goldeye on the lake, and sold it for $15 a plate in Winnipeg as Lake Winnipeg goldeye. So again, that was my move. I then was transferred across to Fort Vermilion, Alberta.
Okay.
Which is fairly close. Another good spot. I learned a lot there. That's when high level was just in its conception. It was just being built at that time when I was in Fort Vermilion. And I went down to, with a friend, we drove down to Peace River because I didn't have a vehicle. And finally I'm on a place with a highway.
Yeah.
I hadn't been any place with a highway in all these years up to that time. So I went down to end up in a place called Grimshaw.
Yeah.
And I saw this 57 Pontiac Zephyr.
Okay.
In a garage parking lot for sale. Psh, $200. I drove out with that damn car. So I used to check the gas and fill the oil quite regularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that lasted 3 years, that old car. I paid $200 for it.
Oh, that's awesome. So, okay, so how old are you at this point now?
Oh, I'm getting a little older. I'm like 25, 26 by then.
Okay. And
by then I had a wife and was ready to have some children.
Okay. And you're in Fort Vermilion.
I'm in Fort Vermilion, and most of the stuff we did in Fort Vermilion was play ball.
Okay.
We used to travel with a bunch of myself, a school teacher, and a bunch of Métis and Chipewyan and Cree guys. We formed a ball team. We used to go to high level. We used to go to Peace River. We used to go to Hay River and NWT.
Okay.
That was our summer, was playing ball.
Oh, that's a good time.
We never won many games because it was hard to put a team together some mornings, but we had a lot of fun. And we really bonded as a group of people.
That's awesome. And you must be still in touch with some folks from then at this point.
I am. Oh, yeah. I am. I meet them. A lot of the people I met then were young kids we used to play ball with, are now part of the Wood Buffalo district, and they're in politics now. So I meet them up once in a while.
Okay. All right. So now, like, what brought you to Norman Wells?
Jeez. Let me think. From Fort Vermilion,
Yeah.
where I was with Indian Affairs,
Yeah.
I transferred to Aklavik, Northwest Territories,
Okay.
with what was known as Northern Affairs.
Okay.
So I went up there as a
And
clerk.
this is a government position.
Yeah, still with the government, but
Okay.
instead of from Indian Affairs, I went to Northern Affairs. Don't ask me the difference.
Okay.
But that was in a Clavic where I ran, was the clerk in charge of the financials for the government up there.
Okay.
Spent a few years there. And then in 1960, I got there in 57. And in 69, we became the Northwest Territories formed its own government. So
Okay.
I was one of the first people to become an NWT government employee.
Okay.
Under Commissioner Stuart
'Cause
Hudson in that time.
It was all federal previous to that.
It was all federal, yeah.
Yeah.
So from a Clavic, they shipped me to Fort Good Hope as settlement manager.
Okay.
And again, that was another place where I spent a terrific amount of years because I looked after not only Fort Good Hope, but I was also responsible for Colville Lake.
Okay. So at this point, you're, getting to know the Sahtu specifically more thoroughly,
Very thoroughly,
and
yes.
and developing relationships here and whatnot. And you have kids at this point?
Yep.
Okay.
I had a couple of kids. And then at that time, I spent a lot of time because the oil industry was just moving into the region, starting to be a lot of oil exploration. And I had a bombardier, 15-passenger bombardier.
Okay.
So I used to spend a lot of time hauling trappers out to their camps in the fall, visiting camps, visiting oil companies. I made one trip with Frank DeSilly, one of the leaders in Good Hope, where we went from Fort Good Hope all the way north to Little Chicago, east to Aubrey Lake, south to Colville Lake, and halfway to Bear Lake before heading back to Good Hope.
Whoa.
All in one shot at about 10 miles an hour, packing hundreds of gallons of gasoline because I got about 8 miles to the gallon on that old beast. But we were able to stay in contact with people. If families needed help, we were able to get out there and help them. We did the same in the summer. We had a good boat where we'd make sure the fish camps were looked after. We'd haul people at the fish camps, pick them up, haul them back in when they were ready to come back in the fall. Wilfred Jackson was my man at that time. He was my number one man to travel around that area. He was my guide and interpreter.
Okay.
So again, 4 or 5 really, really good years in that area.
Wow. That's so cool. I'm just thinking about how that interfaces with kind of the stories that Charles told me. You know what I mean? So it would have been, around a similar time.
Yep.
That
was there during the days when Father Brown became Baron Will Brown.
Okay.
When he went from being a priest to become a married man, and he still used the title as for his own benefit. Great guy and very enjoyable. A lot of people didn't like him. I thought he was a good guy. I did well with him. I always hauled his mail in anytime I went in by air or went in by bombardier. I always took his mail and stuff. So I still, up to the last day, got his Christmas card every year with the envelope with dog team mail. I prized these. I still got them at home. They were stamped by dog team mail and from his mission. But he always had a little stamp he had inside the Christmas card. I don't recollect getting your card last year. Did you forget me? He always had a dig. He always had a way to dig. But that Colville Lake, Prince Charles went in there. Trudeau went in there. He had a lot of very famous guests go in there all the time. And I got to meet some of them, which is good.
So like what was the general like spirit in from your perspective of the Sahtu at that point? Like what was, I'm not, it's kind of like a broad question, but I'm interested just in terms of like how you were thinking of that.
I'd say it was just starting to become political. It
Okay.
was just at that time the people they were forming what they called at that time settlement councils. They were starting to make decisions where they could send information to the government, things that were needed. I worked with Chief Gabriel Kachili. I worked with Chief Charlie Barnaby. We worked very closely together that way. Chief Richard Cashon over in Colville Lake. And at that time, they were fledgling ready for governance.
Okay.
They were starting to this was long before land claims. They were starting to get together. They were starting to come up with ideas. They were starting to say, we can do that. We don't need people to do it for us
Like
anymore.
self-determined.
that was coming out.
Okay.
And people were getting better educated at that time. And then at that time was when the Berger inquiry started for the Mackenzie Valley gas pipeline.
Okay.
And that is when they became very political.
Yeah.
That is when they were able to speak and be heard. That may have been the turning point in the Mackenzie Valley for the Aboriginal people to be heard. And they were heard.
Okay.
Because the pipeline did not proceed at that time.
Yeah. And so, just kind of focusing back in on your skill set at this point, you're working with all these different kinds of people and you're working for the government at this point, right? So, what's your conception of leadership? How is that moving forward? How is that progressing? Do you feel like you're getting more of a grasp on how to build relationships and things like that? Or
yeah. What I said is, the Aboriginal people are starting to become government oriented. They were starting to be more self-sufficient. But remember, at the same time, that was a new NWT government.
Yeah.
69, that was new.
Uh-huh.
So they were kind of growing up together. So there's a lot of interaction. The NWT government was still learning their way as well.
Yeah.
So they were learning in some way from the local people. Traditional knowledge was very prevalent at that time, becoming very prevalent. And I think in some cases, people like Stuart Hudson, who is a very top bureaucrat, learned a lot himself from interaction with the local people.
Okay.
And from him down, he had to make sure his bureaucracy learned the same thing. Mm-hmm. That was difficult at times. Bureaucrats don't like to be taught how to do their job. And we still see that today, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed.
No, I hadn't noticed.
But that was a learning process. And I think that's when the Mackenzie Valley, the Nunavut, the Gwich'in, the Sahtu, the people down in the Slave Lake area, the Decho, all started to feel their oats and knew that we can do more for ourselves, and it's time we started doing it.
Cool. Okay. And then from Good Hope, then it was Norman Wells for you?
I quit, I left the government in Good Hope and joined the Sheeta Regional Council, and I was the Great Bear Development Impact Zone representative working on behalf of the Sahtu communities with the oil companies, interacting on their behalf with the oil companies.
Like a liaison
setting up meetings that the oil companies wanted to do something. Well, I'd make sure that they met with the local communities first. And that's when we started talking about benefits, and benefits to the Aboriginal people from oil and gas exploration.
Yeah.
One of the first big battles was, a lot of work was in the seismic industry. People learning how to be drillers. People like Danny McNeil, our MLA,
and
as it was a driller on the rigs.
Norman Wells was already producing oil at that point.
For about 80 years by that time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But we still had a refinery back in these days too, we had a refinery. But what we did with people like Petro-Canada, for example, had a lot of land up here.
So there was a lot of other interest in the area.
There was a lot of exploration. That's where people got jobs.
Okay.
That's where there was employment. They could go work on a seismic line at 30, 40 below zero for $4.25 an hour. Yep. That was their going rate at that time. But it's not as bad as it sounds. Because your first 8 hours, $4.25, your second 4 hours are time and a half, and your next 4 hours are double time.
Okay.
So you were working a 16-hour day though.
Yeah.
And that was for 3-4 weeks at a time.
Okay.
That was how but you went away with a decent paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
The other things I managed to work with some of the oil companies was other additional benefits for people that stayed for a winter and worked.
Okay.
And what we did is at the end of a winter season, people that stayed for the year were given the skidoos off the job.
Oh.
If you'd spent the whole season and worked for them and filled all your shifts in, you were eligible to win a skidoo.
Okay.
And what benefit that was to the companies, and they didn't realize it at the time, because the workers knew that we would be a skidoo for them at the end of the season, these skidoos were well maintained. Things work both ways sometimes.
Yeah, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of the companies actually did do some stuff like that.
Okay.
And then we had other companies that came in that gave major benefits to some of the communities. Paramount and Clover Lake had a terrific working relationship. You know, they did well out of it. And I think there's a lot more could have been done. I think local people could have done better. But I think for what it was, it went well. It's just too bad that it ended.
Sure.
I mean, we ended up with millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on exploration, but no development other than Norman Wells oil field.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody took oil out of here.
So
Nobody took gas out of here.
Yeah, there was so much like potential. It felt like, you know, and then it just went. So when did it all kind of stop and then shut down?
Just after the last series with Husky, Shell, MGM, ConocoPhillips, that was the last big hurrah, I think, here.
And can you just give me a time frame, just because I don't know?
10 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
8 to 10 years ago was about the end of I'd say the good times, when there was lots of employment, lots of benefits to the contracting companies around here, and that just teetered off. I think the cost to do business was so bad that had we had a highway at that time, this oil could still be, the development could have taken place by now. But what used to happen is an oil company wanted to bring a rig in to drill for oil. He'd have to bring it in August on the barge.
Yeah.
Rack it on shore for 4 or 5 months at $50,000 a day before it could go to work in January or February when the ground was frozen.
Yeah.
Whereas if he could have brought it up on the road in December and got to work in January,
Yeah.
his cost would be so low, we'd still be working here. I'm sure if we had that highway here back in these days, we'd still be working and be developing that shale process across the river, the oil and gas. There's unbelievable amounts of shale oil and gas across the river within 20 miles of Norman Wells. What I would have liked to have seen is that developed and that gas and oil brought through the Norman Wells oil into our pipeline here. For some reason, that did not happen.
And so are you working in local politics at this point? Like, you know, what's your role?
Yeah, I think 85 I was elected to council.
Okay.
I came here in 84.
Okay.
Yeah, 84.
And were you working the kind of liaising job while you were on council?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. The council, yeah, I worked on, yeah. So I've been up more or less off and on council since 85.
Okay.
Right up to now. This is my third term as mayor right now.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed it very, very much. It's challenging at times and it's rewarding at times.
Totally.
And if I was a damn old 1 foot in the grave like I am, I'd like to do it some more. But my wife said I'm not, so I guess I'm not.
And what captures you about, you know, leadership in that way? Like what really brings you to life, and what about it inspires you?
I think the leadership part, working with a good council. This last 2 years, the last 2 terms on council, the last 6 years have been really good because we had good teamwork working together. We ran into some problems when we took it over, and we got through that. We're still getting through that. But we got people that were like-minded, working for the benefit of the community. Nobody on our council was there for their own benefit. Nobody there was there for anybody else's benefit except what's best for our community. And that's how we've worked it for the last 6 years. What can we do for our community? And it's been very, very enjoyable working with a group of people who were like-minded, who put the community first. And let's hope that continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'd love to talk about, you know, the Sahtu Summit and kind of your, you know, how you view that and, you know, where you hope that goes.
Well, I think what confused me for the longest time is when our NWT government and the federal government are recognizing other governments, Aboriginal governments, regional governments, whereas in fact the only real governments in my mind are the municipal governments. So in the Sahtu we have 5 municipal governments. So my idea and our idea at council was to pull together the elected leadership The municipal governments all are elected people. The hamlet of Toledo. Fort Good Hope, the chief is the mayor. Delaney has its own self-government process. Cove Lake looks after its own things. So the idea was to pool the municipal governments, all 5 of us together, to work together, to work with NWT government, and to talk with one voice. Whether it's for the Mackenzie Valley All-Season Road, whether it's for the purchase of money to build fire breaks to protect our communities from fire, work together with one voice rather than 5 separate voices.
Yeah, because
and that was the whole idea of the summit.
And how'd it go?
I believe it went very well. It was the first time we tried it for a time, because back before land claims, our regional council, the Sahtu Regional Council, was the chief, the mayor, and the president of the Media Local from each community, working together with a councillor from each organisation. That was your regional council, working very closely together. We had a speaker, Pete Fraser, a former MLA, great person that lived here, and I think Sandra Whiteman was the executive director, and we got an awful lot accomplished back in these days, working together with municipal governments, band councils, media locals, all working together with one purpose: what's best for the Sahtu region. That kind of fell off. After land claims, there were new organizations formed.
Okay.
And I believe that because they were formed through negotiations done by the local people, then that's the way it has to be. They negotiated it with the federal government, and that's in law. Can't fight that. But at least the municipal governments, the 5 of us, can work together to get what's best for municipalities, because we're the first line of government in every community, and we're the people that make sure that the dogs are tied up, who make sure the snow's removed from your driveway, who make sure that the water is pure and clean and safe to drink, and then we pick your sewer up. That's our job. We do it. And if we don't do it right, we're the first people that they complain to. They don't complain to the Prime Minister or the NWT Premier. They complain to the Mayor and Council members. And that's why we do such a good job and try and stay on top of all of that. It's not always easy, but we try our damnedest on behalf of our residents every day of our term.
So what are the issues? Because, the Sahtu communities being so remote and being, in it together in so many ways, and facing the same issues. What do you view the top 5 issues as that, collectively the communities aim to solve?
Well, the one that we're all lobbying for, of course, is the all-season road to come from Wrigley to the Norman Wells, at least. The river communities are in trouble if we do not get more water. If BC and Alberta continue to dry up and we don't get the flow of water from there, we may still be able to get enough water to get barges to Norman Wells and Toledo. To service Good Hope, I think they may end up still having to go up the Dempster Highway or up the Alaska Highway, Dempster Highway, and down to Good Hope, because the Rampart Rapids are just what they are, impassable in low water. So that's one thing, is resupply to our communities. That to me is one of the biggest issues that I see, is resupply to our communities affordably, that the cost of living can decrease. We sure as hell can't have it increase anymore. If somebody looks at the prices in our stores, the prices to do business, it's intolerable. It's a disgrace to Canada to see what we're paying here. How do we resolve it? What if there is no water in the river? What if global warming shortens the life of winter roads? What's the plan to look after our people here? Fly everything in at what cost? Is that consumer going to pay for every damn thing at the cost of delivery? Or are we going to get subsidised in some way from the federal and territorial governments? We don't know. We don't even know if they're thinking about it. We're thinking about it. We're trying to interact with them on that. We're trying to get them to come to the table and talk to us. Very difficult. The only people that we had any luck with talking was when the mayor of Toledo and myself went down to Ottawa, banged on some doors. Not one federal cabinet minister would meet with us. So we went to the Senate. We went and introduced us to Senator Anderson, who we knew before. Senator Anderson of the NWT. Senator Dennis Patterson of Nunavut. They met with us, assigned some of their staff to work with us to put together a plan to bring to the nation's capital what we're living with up here. Within a month of that meeting, we were invited to come and make a presentation at the Canadian Senate, which we did. I took 2 businessmen from Northern Wales with me to help me, Jason Belaski, David Hudson, because of his interaction on winter road construction, highway construction, and Jason is a businessman who lost an awful lot of money or spent an awful lot of money because his resupply did not get all his material in here. We went and made a presentation at the Senate. Since then, we've been on As It Happened, CBC. We've been on the Globe and Mail. We are not waiting for people to come to us. We're aggressively going after them. We recently invited the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities to come and meet with us. We got a message from one of his staff that he'd be happy to meet with us. That's not what we want. I'm going down to to Calgary in a couple of weeks' time. And I'm going to demand Pierre Trudeau's son, Justin, come and meet with us.
Yeah.
Not for photo ops and pictures, but to roll these bloody sleeves up and come and sit with us and learn what our situation is here.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned that the feds don't have a clue what's going on. And as you know, we've got a brand new territorial government. They're in a learning stage. We've got ministers who are very new to the job. They're learning. We can't wait. That's why through this summit, with all 5 of us working together, we will have a voice, and maybe somebody's going to listen to us. But we're not going to back off. We can't wait for people to come to us. We got to go to them.
What would you describe as the best outcome and what is the best version of the summit? You know, the summit at its best. What does that look like?
The first thing is that we all agree to work together, and we've done that.
Yeah.
That was number 1. We've got that, but we are going to work together. The second thing is we spent time going over at this first summit specific issues. The life of the Northern oil field. That concerns us. The lack of an all-season road. Healthcare. Some of the issues that concern people. Now, our next summit is going to be, I believe, fall. Let's say September, October. And at that time, we're going to get together and meet and develop solutions that we think government should be listening to. We, as I said, we don't wait for people to give us how it's going to be done. We got to tell them how it can be done and how it will work in our favor.
Well,
so that's the next step.
I can't see any other way other than the people who are in the situation having, a sense of how to solve the problem. You know what I mean? Like, even if we don't have the money to build the highway, it's a clear solution in some way. You know what I mean? Like, so it has to come from the local in some way, and I think the summit's a great idea.
But Joshua, the point here being, the forecasted completion of the highway is 2037.
Yeah.
But if we got no river for barge traffic in 2024 or 2025, what is the plan of government to service our communities?
No, you're absolutely correct there.
That's my problem. Do they have a plan? Because I don't think they do. So I think it's time that we develop a plan of what we expect from our government should that river run up be non-navigable. Mm-hmm. I mean, not only non-navigable to Northern Wales and Toledo and Good Hope, but all the way up the Mackenzie Valley to Inuvik and the Kitikmeot areas, the Mackenzie Delta communities. The cost to ship that stuff up by truck, I'm assuming it's a lot less to get your fuel up on a barge than it is on a truck.
Yeah.
And last year, what was it? They shipped the fuel from Washington State around Alaska and into the Mackenzie Delta. I mean, this is what we're really facing right now.
Totally, and it's a bleak reality.
Yeah. But that to me is our main concern, that we should sit down and quit bitching and complaining and come up with solutions.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping we'll be start working on at our next summit.
So for everyone in the Sahtu who is working on these problems and whatnot, like, I don't know, what do you have to say? Like, is there an invitation, a participatory invitation? And then I have one more question after that.
I think what we're going to be doing here is sit down ahead of the meeting, have a conference call amongst the leadership. Who do they want to come in and meet with us at the next summit? Is there any politician they'd like us to invite? Mm-hmm. And here's the topics we want them to talk about. That's one of the steps. And you had another question for me.
The other question is, do you have fears associated with the summit and how it could go wrong, and what would those be?
No, I think what we did, we had this first summit, we had the 5 Sahtu communities, as I said, mutual governments. I think for the next one, we would invite as guests people from the Sahtu Secretariat, maybe from some of our land corporations, because they are also a powerful voice. Mm-hmm. We need a powerful voice working together. Mm-hmm. And I think my thought is that we invite them to partner with us moving forward. Mm-hmm. We'd be willing to take the lead on it. I think the town of Norman Wells has offered to the other 4 communities that we'll take the lead on putting these things together. And I think it's maybe time that some of the other stakeholders in the region become involved working with us. I'd like to see that happen.
Are you naturally an optimist or a pessimist?
50-50. I'm there sometimes. Other times I don't think it's going to work. But right now, I'll tell you, I'll be very blunt with you here. I think one of my fears right now is, what am I going to have for a Norman Wells Council coming up with an election this fall? Who are we going to have running? Are we going to have people like-minded that want to work on the behalf of our community to see it flourish, to work together, to be working as a team on the benefit of our residents? I'm hoping we get some really good candidates running. If we get a good council, that's all I'm looking forward to right now. Mm-hmm. That's my fear, that we don't have the right people in there, that maybe have their own agenda. But if we get people that are like-minded that want to work together, so be it. Good luck to them.
Yeah. And how do you feel kind of coming to the end of your tenure?
I think it's been a tough 6 years. I think we've handled it very well. There has been criticism at times, but a lot of the stuff we have never stood on a soapbox and fought back. We've accepted what people have had to say. A good example is, take a look at the roads down, some of the roads work that we've done and we're proposing to do. Take a look at that landfill. When we took it over, it had 40 years life in it. Now it's got 40 years life in it. Just an example. Take a look at the Couturier lot. We said we have got to show by example. That was our lots. So we, by example, said we better clean our mess up before we expect other people to clean their mess up. We've done that. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing more work. We're working to get to right now on a development plan for the Couturier lots. We still call them George's lots, but they were actually town lots. We're looking at development downtown to get the daycare up and running. We're going to work with the Daycare Society. We've got meetings coming up along that line. Things are moving very, very well. We're looking at a cultural centre to look at the heritage of the Sahtu region. Not only Norman Wells oil, not only the indigenous people, but the culture of the Sahtu region. Going back, as I said, 100 years of oil, there's got to be something there. Mm-hmm. And there's got to be a lot of talk about the Aboriginal, how they have become a major player in our region. So I think a cultural centre is something we're going to work together with. We're looking for more partners to partner with us on it. We have got applications in. We're working on the funding right now. And I think there are a lot of good things that this council have kick-started, and it's going to take a new council to complete.
Mm-hmm.
If they're willing to do that, good luck. This community is going to thrive.
Yeah, I'm an optimist by nature, so I don't know if optimism, like how to describe that. Like, is it a feeling? Is it like an act of faith? I don't exactly know how I would characterize optimism, but I'm optimistic that the Sahtu and Norman Wells will, sort out what they need to sort out. I think it's necessary, and I think that the people here have the drive to make that happen, and it's inspiring. So, just to close here, for the person who fills your shoes, what's your advice? If you had to sum it up, like if you were to kind of hand over a nugget of your wisdom that you've gathered over this lifetime of through the history of Canada, yeah.
First thing you got to do is become a team player. The mayor leadership is you earn the respect of your council and committee by showing leadership, working with them. Just because you're the mayor, you do not make decisions. Your council make decisions. The mayor makes no decisions. The council make decisions. No individual councillor makes decisions and gets things done. Things that are done through debate. You work together as a council. You work, if you something you want to do, you sell it to your other fellow council members, and then the vote is taken, and you get your own way, or you don't get your own way. But if you're willing to come in as a mayor or as a council member, come in as a team player, listening to other people's point of view as well as your own. Don't be shy to share your own point of view, but listen to the other people. Don't be afraid of taking advice from people, but if the mayor himself has got, or herself, has got to show leadership qualities and team building. I think that's where it comes from.
And, yeah. Great. Any last words? Anything else you want to put out there before we close?
No, I just thank you for this opportunity. As I said, I came here in '84 saying, Norman Wells, what the hell? Is it a place I want to live? Is it a place I want to raise a family? It is. I'm proud to say that all 4 of my children are here now. I've got grandchildren here. I've got great-grandchildren here. So anything I'm doing as a council member is not for me personally, but for my family and all the other families living in this town. You've got to think outside the box. It's a lot bigger than you are. But you work towards it, make it happen.
Well, Frank, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you today, and I look forward to interfacing with you more and working together. It's it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure to talk to you, and I thank you for the opportunity. I am now going to go and chase the ace.